My dad lifted his glass at my sister's wedding and said loud enough for every chandelier to hear, "Some kids make you proud, others just take up space." The room laughed, small, polite, terrified laughs. My mother kept her smile perfectly still. My brother-in-law clinked his glass like nothing happened, and I sat there, every nerve on fire, realizing I'd just been erased in front of everyone I grew up with. So I smiled back steady and said, "Good thing I just got my own place 2,000 miles away. Don't worry, you'll never have to see me take up space again." The laughter died before the echo did. I stood, left my champagne untouched, and walked out of their perfect picture. That was the night they toasted their control, and I started planning my escape. Before I tell you how I left them speechless for good, tell me where are you listening from, so I know I'm not alone. And when you've heard the rest, tell me what would you have done if your own family tried to shrink you down to nothing. The night after the wedding, I couldn't sleep. The hotel air smelled like champagne and lilies, the same mix that had clung to my dress when I walked out of that room. I kept replaying it, the sound of my dad's voice over the microphone, the polite laughter that followed, the way my mother's smile never cracked. I'd always known there were rules in our family. I just hadn't realized humiliation was one of them. Back home in Indiana, the silence hit harder than the toast. My parents' house looked exactly the same, the gray shutters, the manicured lawn, the light in the kitchen that never turned off. But something had shifted. Even the air felt contractual, like I owed rent for breathing there. Dad was in his usual spot at the dining table laptop, open spreadsheets, glowing against his glasses. He didn't look up when I came in, just said, "You made quite an exit." His tone wasn't angry, it was clinical, like he was assessing damage to an investment. Mom poured herself coffee and added, "Your father's just worried. You embarrassed yourself, that's all. Embarrassed myself. That's how they rewrite it." Kelsey texted later a row of hearts and champagne emojis from her honeymoon like none of it had happened. She'd always been good at selective memory. When she flunked freshman year, they called it burnout. When I asked for help with tuition, it was irresponsibility. Same story, different narrator. For years, I'd told myself they just didn't understand me. That one day I'd do something big enough, responsible enough, successful enough to make them see me as more than an obligation. But that night, sitting in my old bedroom, surrounded by participation trophies and unpaid emotional debts, I realized they understood perfectly. They just liked the hierarchy the way it was. Dad once said to me, "If you want love, earn it." At 16, I thought it was wisdom. At 27, I finally saw the cruelty tucked inside. The love I kept trying to buy with hard work and obedience was already mortgaged to someone else, Kelsey, the daughter who never had to ask twice. The next morning, I made myself coffee in the same chipped mug I'd used since high school. I watched Dad head to the garage in his pressed shirt, Mom watering the plants I'd once killed by forgetting them for a week. It all looked so normal, and that terrified me more than the wedding ever did, because if I stayed, I knew what would happen. They'd smooth it over, rewrite the night into a misunderstanding, and I'd be folded right back into the role they built for me, useful, quiet, apologetic. But this time, I didn't apologize. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started a new spreadsheet. It wasn't for them. It was titled Oxygen. 2 weeks passed before anyone mentioned the toast. That's how my family handled conflict, by starving it of oxygen until it learned to behave. In the group chat, Mom sent photos of Kelsey and her husband on the Amalfi Coast. Captions like, "Our bright girl living her dream." Everyone reacted with hearts and sparkles. No one tagged me. No one said a word about that night. It was like I'd been edited out of the family footage trimmed for pacing. So I played along. I hearted a few photos, dropped a polite, "Looks amazing," the same way you clap for a magician when you already know the trick. Then I went back to my new ritual. Mornings were for work, afternoons for searching jobs in other cities, evenings for building what I called the escape fund. Every time Mom texted a guilt-laced question, "Have you talked to your sister?" I sold something. A stack of books, a dress I'd worn twice an old camera. Each sale went straight into a private account named Oxygen. Every click felt like a breath. One night, Dad called. His tone was falsely gentle. "Your mother says you've been distant." I almost laughed. "I've been consistent, you just noticed." He paused, then said, "Don't be dramatic. Family's family. That line used to work on me. Not anymore. After we hung up, I opened the file on my desktop labeled Plans. Inside were job postings in Portland, Denver, Flagstaff, far enough to break the echo, close enough that I could still send postcards if I ever wanted to. Lucas called that same night. He'd been on the road for work for months, but he always checked in. "How are you holding up?" I hesitated. "I'm fine." He didn't buy it. Gianna fine is what people say when they've stopped hoping it gets better. I didn't answer. Because he was right. I had stopped hoping, just not for the reason he thought. Later, I got a text from Naomi, his ex. The kind of text that looks friendly but smells like intrusion. He says, "You've been thinking about moving. Portland suits you." I stared at it, fingers hovering over the screen, and then deleted it. I wasn't giving her or anyone space to narrate my life again. A few days later, Mom called, pretending to check on my health. "You sounded tired last time. You should rest." Then, like slipping a knife between ribs, she added, "Don't run away from family because of one bad night. Run away." That's what she'd call it. Not leaving, not saving myself, just running. That's when it clicked. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done negotiating. I opened Plans again and renamed it Exit. Then I booked an interview flight for Portland. The confirmation email hit my inbox like a heartbeat. The next morning, I walked past my parents' house windows, glowing lawn, perfect curtains drawn tight, and realized something they'd built a home that looked alive from the outside but couldn't breathe. And I was finally learning how to. It happened faster than I expected, the collapse, the exposure, the quiet rage that followed. A week before my interview, I got a call from Kelsey. Her voice was thin, shaky. Not the golden girl confidence everyone worshipped. "He's been gone for days," she said. "He says he needs space." I heard a small, bitter laugh through the phone. Funny how men always use your own words against you. I didn't want to get involved, but I knew that tone defeat mixed with disbelief. It was the sound I'd swallowed for years. So I drove over. Her apartment looked staged for heartbreak. Half-empty closets, wine glasses drying in the sink, a wedding photo still face down on the counter. She handed me a box and said I can't move back there alone. They're meant Indian. Our parents' kingdom. We packed in silence until she whispered, "You were right to leave." I wanted to tell her it wasn't about being right, it was about surviving. But I just nodded. By nightfall, her boxes were stacked by the door. She hugged me before I left something she hadn't done since we were kids. "Don't let them pull you back in," she said. It almost sounded like a blessing. When I got home, the house was darker than usual. Mom was sitting in the living room, phone in hand, the screen lighting half her face. "You helped your sister move?" she asked without looking up. I froze. "How did you?" Kelsey called. "Said you were wonderful. Said you told her to come home." I didn't. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Well, she's on her way anyway, and we're having dinner Sunday. You'll be there." It wasn't a question. That night, I caught the reflection of my own face in the window, calm but hollow. I opened my laptop, checked the Plans folder, and there it was, the email from Portland's subject line, "Interview confirmation." For the first time in months, I felt something close to relief. I printed the offer details, packed my portfolio, and slid both into a leather folder labeled Next Chapter. Then I did something reckless. I opened the shared family bank account, the one Dad insisted on for emergencies. I transferred every cent that was mine into my personal account and hit Close Account. Clean, silent, legal. 2 days later, Mom's tone shifted. Her text came wrapped in sugar dinner at 6 Kelsey's cooking lasagna. That was the tell. Mom never let anyone else cook. I knew then it wasn't a dinner, it was an ambush. I charged my phone, backed up my files to a small USB, and left it in my purse. If they wanted to talk, they could do it without my plans inside their reach. At 6 sharp, I walked into the house. The table was set for 4 candles lit like a peace offering. Dad was scrolling his phone, Kelsey sitting stiff beside him. Mom poured wine and smiled like nothing had ever broken. "Sit," Dad said. I did, but this time I wasn't the one on trial. The second I sat down, I knew. The air had that heavy, artificial calm that always came before one of their talks. Candles flickered between us, the table perfectly staged like a photo shoot for forgiveness no one meant. Dad didn't look up from his phone when he started. Your cousin Mia says you've been applying out west. His tone was soft, but his words were loaded like bullets, wrapped in politeness. I kept my voice level. That's right. I had an interview. Mom set down her wine. We're just worried you're running from something, Gianna. Kelsey's eyes darted toward me, warning or apology, I couldn't tell. I smiled that practiced, dangerous calm I'd learned from them. Maybe I'm running towards something. Dad finally looked at me. His gaze had the weight of a closing door. Don't turn this into another rebellion. You've always been dramatic. Or maybe you've always been cruel, I said quietly. The room went still. Kelsey's fork clinked against her plate. Mom's smile cracked just slightly. You don't mean that. I do. My voice surprised even me. You humiliated me in public and you all laughed. You raised me on contracts and lectures, then called it love. You say family is forever, but what you really mean is obedience. Dad pushed his chair back, slow and deliberate. Watch your tone. I laughed. It wasn't loud, just sharp enough to slice through the tension. That's all you care about, isn't it, tone? Presentation. Control. You don't care if you hurt people as long as it looks civilized. He stood. We gave you everything. No, I said. You sold me everything. At interest. For the first time, his face shifted just a flicker like a crack in old porcelain. Kelsey's voice broke the silence. Dad, please. Stay out of this, he snapped. That was it. The old reflex, the hierarchy reasserting itself. But it didn't land this time. Kelsey went quiet, not from fear, but from understanding. I stood. This isn't a dinner, it's a performance. And I'm not playing anymore. Mom's voice trembled something rare. You're making a mistake. Maybe I said, but at least it'll be mine. I turned to Kelsey. Are you staying? Her eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. I nodded once and walked toward the door. Gianna. Dad's voice carried that command he'd perfected over the years, the kind that froze you mid-step. Don't walk away from this family. I looked back at him. You walked away first. You just did it slower. I left without slamming the door. Quiet exits hurt louder. Outside, the night was heavy with summer humidity. I got in my car, gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. My phone buzzed once Mom's text, "Come home. We can talk like adults." I deleted it. Back at my apartment, the air felt still but breathable. I set my bag down, opened my laptop, and saw the unread email glowing at the top of my inbox offer. Creative Strategist, Portland. For a moment, I just stared at it. The exact kind of moment my family would call too good to be true. But I clicked it open anyway. Full-time, remote, benefits, salary higher than I'd hoped. The line at the bottom said, "We'd love to have you start next month." It was everything they said I didn't deserve. I printed the offer and slid it into my next chapter folder next to the closed account confirmation. Each document was proof that I could build something without their permission. Then I heard the faint vibration of my phone, again, unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Gianna Kelsey's voice, whispering, "They're furious. Mom found your spreadsheet. She told Dad you were planning to humiliate them by leaving." I closed my eyes. How did she find it? She went through your laptop when you were at dinner. Said she was checking the battery. Of course she did. It wasn't enough to control the story, they had to own the script. "Don't come back," Kelsey said. "They're waiting for you." Doors closed. "Please don't." My throat tightened. "Thank you." We stayed on the line for a moment, both breathing like we were afraid of being heard. Then she whispered, "I'm proud of you," and hung up. I sat there motionless. The betrayal burned, but underneath it was something steadier clarity. I pulled my suitcase from the closet, set it open on the floor, and started packing. Not the panic kind of packing, measured, deliberate. The good jeans, 2 shirts that felt like me, the leather folder, the USB. Everything else could rot here. Before dawn, I slipped out the door. The air was damp and cold enough to sting. The neighborhood was still asleep, every window dark except one, probably someone else awake and waiting for change. At the end of the driveway, I looked back at the house. The porch light flickered once like a tired heartbeat. I whispered, "You wanted me gone. Now you get your wish." The taxi arrived on time. The driver didn't ask questions. We rode in silence down the empty highway, city lights fading behind us. When the airport doors opened, the smell of coffee and floor polish hit me at once. I found a seat near the window, opened my phone, and saw another text Dad this time. "Don't make choices you can't undo." I typed back but didn't send it. Some mistakes are the only way out. Then I deleted it entirely. As the sun climbed, a voice announced my flight to Portland. I grabbed my bag, walked to the gate, and for the first time in years, felt no need to look over my shoulder. On the plane, as the engines roared to life, I closed my eyes. My father's words echoed again. "Some kids make you proud, others just take up space." I smiled soft and steady. "Then watch me take all the space I need." The plane lifted through the clouds, and I swear for a second, it felt like oxygen. Portland didn't greet me with fireworks, just soft rain and the smell of cedar through an open cab window. The apartment I'd rented was small, a little cracked at the edges, but it was mine. No rules taped to the fridge, no silent disapproval hanging in the air. The first night I unpacked slowly, each folded shirt a quiet declaration: I'm here. I'm free. A week later, the agency officially welcomed me aboard. My boss called me steady and sharp, 2 words no one in my family had ever used about me. I started sleeping through the night again. The silence didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like peace. Then a voicemail came from Kelsey. Her voice was calm, this time lighter. "I got the job in Chicago," she said. Mom cried, but it wasn't sadness. It was losing control. "Thank you for showing me it's possible." I replayed it twice. Then I smiled. For the first time, our family cycle didn't end in apology. It ended in distance. Safe, necessary distance. Outside, the rain softened to mist. I opened the window wider and breathed in. This wasn't running away. This was arriving. I sat by the window that night, city lights reflecting off the wet pavement below. My phone buzzed once another family dinner photo, the same empty chair at the end of the table. I didn't open it. Some stories don't need sequels. I poured myself a glass of water, raised it slightly, and whispered, "Here's to taking up space." The quiet answered back like a friend. If you've ever been told you were too much, too loud, or not enough, remember this. Sometimes peace sounds like your own voice uninterrupted. Tell me, what would you have done? And if you felt that, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
My name is Judith Saunders, and I'm 29 years old. If you told me 4 years ago that love could feel like a slow unraveling rather than a grand story, I would have laughed. Back then, everything seemed certain. I had a steady career in software engineering, my first apartment downtown, and a heart that still believed effort could fix anything. That was before Charles Cole. I met him at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was charming without trying to be the kind of man who made you believe every word was meant just for you. We spent that night laughing over bad karaoke, arguing about our favorite movies, and finishing each other's sentences like we'd known each other forever. He worked in marketing, ambitious, clever, always chasing the next idea. When he smiled at me across the table, it felt like possibility itself had leaned closer. A week later, he asked me out. 2 months later, I was spending every other night at his apartment. He made me feel seen, understood. For a while, it was the kind of connection people post about online and call soulmate energy. Early on, Charles told me about his ex, Sophie. They'd dated for 2 years in college. It ended messy. He said lots of tears, drama, emotional highs and lows. "She's impulsive, unpredictable," he told me one night, shaking his head. "I loved her, but she loved chaos more than me." I remember feeling lucky that he wanted something different now. He said I was stable, grounded, his peace. And I wore that label proudly, not realizing then how heavy it would become. For the first year, we were good. We cooked together, took weekend trips, built routines. I supported him through a rough patch when his agency cut staff and he lost his job. He was shaken, questioning his worth, but I reminded him he'd find something better. I covered rent for 2 months, helped him rework his portfolio, even introduced him to a former colleague who got him an interview. I believed in him like it was a full-time job. And then little by little, Sophie slipped back into our lives. It started innocently enough, her name appearing on his phone screen during dinner. He said she'd sent a funny meme from their old group chat. "We're still friends, that's all," he explained casually, eyes never leaving his plate. I told myself it was harmless. People can stay friends with exes, right? But soon it became constant. Comments on each other's posts, heart emojis, inside jokes I didn't understand. I'd notice him smiling at his phone late at night, that private kind of smile people make when nostalgia whispers louder than common sense. One night we were watching a movie on the couch when Sophie's name lit up again. He chuckled at something she'd said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I tried to keep my tone light. Still pretty close with her, huh? He looked up slightly defensive. She's just a friend, Judith. You don't have to get jealous every time a woman texts me. I'm not jealous, I said carefully. But maybe it's weird. You used to date her. He sighed, setting the phone down. Not everything's about you feeling insecure. Sophie and I have history, sure, but that doesn't mean anything now. You trust me, don't you? I did, or at least I wanted to. So I nodded even though my stomach twisted. That became our pattern. He'd downplay it, and I'd swallow the discomfort. The next week, she tagged him in an old throwback photo, some beach trip from their college days, both of them grinning, his arms around her. When I asked why he didn't untag himself, he laughed. Why would I? It's just a memory. Memories, I realized, can be sharp things when you're the one standing outside them. I started noticing more subtle changes. He'd talk about Sophie's adventures, her new travel blog, the places she'd been. She's always chasing something new, he said, almost wistfully. That's what I used to love about her. I smiled, but inside, something cracked. The next day, I found myself staring at my reflection, wondering when steady had started sounding like boring. Still, I stayed. Because that's what love teaches you to do. Wait, hope. Believe the storm will pass. By our second year together, I received an email that should have changed everything Amsterdam. My company offered me a senior developer position overseas, higher pay, creative freedom, a chance to work on projects I'd dreamed about. My heart raced as I told him, expecting excitement. Instead, he frowned. Amsterdam. That's far. I just got my new job, and I'm finally in a good rhythm here. You're really going to leave all that for a maybe? It's not a maybe, I said softly. It's my dream job. He hesitated, then added, Sophie's been helping me adjust. You know, I can't just walk away from everything right now. I remember that moment vividly, the quiet way he said her name like it meant home. That night I turned down Amsterdam. I told myself love was about compromise, but deep down it felt more like surrender. He thanked me, hugged me tight, and whispered, You're my rock. I smiled against his shoulder. But somewhere inside, I knew rocks don't grow, they just endure. As months passed, our closeness faded into routine. He started spending more evenings catching up with friends, which I learned later often included Sophie. When I asked about it, he rolled his eyes. God, Judith, stop policing my friendships. You're making this exhausting. I wanted to shout to ask why loyalty suddenly sounded like control, but I didn't. I just nodded, letting silence become my defense. One night I woke up to find him gone from bed. He was on the balcony phone, in hand, whispering, laughing softly. When I asked who he was talking to, he said, Work stuff. Go back to sleep. I didn't. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, realizing I was beginning to know the taste of loneliness, even while sharing a bed. The next morning, he kissed my forehead like nothing had happened. Don't overthink, okay? But something inside me already had. Because the truth is, betrayal doesn't always arrive as a confession. Sometimes it drips slowly through small lies, soft reassurances, and half smiles that never reach the eyes. That was the morning I opened my laptop and saw a new message. Amsterdam's offer had been renewed. A second chance. And for the first time, I didn't know whether to tell him. I thought I was building a future with him. Turns out I was just keeping the door open for his past. When that second email from Amsterdam arrived, my hands trembled. It wasn't just an offer, it was a reminder that I still had a life of my own to live. The company wanted me to lead a new AI division, all expenses covered, relocation package, the works. My boss even wrote, You turned this down once. We're offering it again because we believe in you. I read that line over and over while Charles snored softly beside me. It felt like the universe was whispering, Are you sure you want to keep shrinking for someone who never notices? But I didn't accept it. Not yet. I waited until the weekend to bring it up. We were cooking dinner, pasta, his favorite, and I said casually, The Amsterdam team reached out again. They still want me. Charles looked up from the stove, frowning slightly. Again, I thought we talked about this. We did, but it's a great opportunity. They're offering even more this time. He stirred the sauce slowly, avoiding eye contact. You really want to move halfway across the world and start over? For what a pay raise. It's not just about money, Charles, I said gently. It's about growth. It's something I've worked for my whole career. He sighed, setting the spoon down. Judith, I just got things back on track here. My job's stable, my routine's good, and what about our relationship you'd be leaving me behind? I tried to sound reasonable. You could come with me. We could make it an adventure together. He chuckled humorlessly. You know I can't just pick up and leave like that. Sophie's still helping me with the brand campaign at work. It's a big deal for both of us. Sophie again. Always Sophie. My chest tightened. You're saying no to our future because your ex is helping you with a project. He looked offended. Wow. That's not fair. She's just a coworker now. You're twisting this into something it's not. I forced a smile, swallowing everything I wanted to say. You're right. I'm probably overthinking. Later that night, I sat at my desk, staring at the email draft empty. Except for one sentence blinking on the screen, I respectfully declined the offer. My mouse hovered over send, and I did it. A single click, a single moment that changed everything. Charles came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. You did the right thing, babe, he whispered. You're my constant, my safe place. I leaned back into him mechanically, but the words stung more than they soothed. Safe place. Constant. Rock. Every compliment he gave me felt like a box tightening around my ribs. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering when love had started to feel like slow suffocation. Over the next few weeks, life returned to its dull rhythm. I went to work, came home cooked, cleaned, smiled. Charles texted Sophie often sometimes right in front of me. When I looked uncomfortable, he'd smirk. Still jealous. Come on, Judith. You've got to be more confident than that. I stopped bringing it up, stopped asking, stopped expecting honesty. But I couldn't stop noticing. The way he'd light up when Sophie posted a new picture. The way his laughter changed when he mentioned her name. The way he forgot the small things about me, how I liked my coffee, the playlist I made for our first trip, the dream he once said we'd share. Love was fading, but habit kept me tethered. Then came the third offer. Same company, same position. Only this time, the email subject line read, Final call, Amsterdam. Relocation opportunity, deadline, 48 hours. I opened it in silence, feeling my pulse in my throat. When Charles came home that night, I decided to tell him. Maybe deep down, I hoped he'd surprise me, say yes, say he'd go with me this time. Charles Usher began. As we sat down for dinner, they offered Amsterdam again. It's the last time. I need to decide by tomorrow. He froze mid-bite. You're still thinking about that, Judith. We've been over this. He cut me off, his voice rising. Why can't you just be happy here? You've got a good job. We've got each other. Why chase something that's just going to ruin what we have? Because what we have, I said quietly, feels like it's standing still. He stared at me for a long moment, then laughed, shaking his head. You sound like Sophie, always restless, never satisfied. Her name hung between us like a slap. I took a breath. Charles, if we're serious about this relationship, I need you to set boundaries. I can't keep pretending Sophie doesn't exist between us. He leaned back, arms crossed. Boundaries. You mean cutting off my friend because you're insecure? That's not what I said. It's what you mean, he snapped. I'm not cutting her off just because you can't handle me having a past. Grow up, Judith. For a moment, the room went silent, except for the ticking clock on the wall. I stared at him, the man I once thought was kind, self-aware, mature, and realized he was none of those things when his ego felt cornered. Finally, I nodded. Fair point. He blinked, caught off guard. That's it? That's it. I stood, gathered our plates, and carried them to the sink. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. After he went to bed, I opened my laptop again. The Amsterdam email was still there, waiting like a quiet promise. Without hesitation this time, I clicked accept. A small pop-up appeared. Your confirmation has been received. Welcome aboard. And just like that, I was free. No announcement, no fight, no tears. Just a decision made in silence, the kind that doesn't feel like escape, but like coming home to yourself. Over the next few days, I started planning. I didn't tell Charles. I paid off shared bills, started sorting through drawers, and sublet the apartment to a grad student who'd move in after I left. Every small act felt like reclaiming oxygen. Charles, meanwhile, acted as if everything was fine. He scrolled through Sophie's photos, laughed at her jokes, and called me his rock. And every time he said it, I smiled politely, thinking rocks don't fly, but I will. The night before my flight confirmation came through, I walked out to the balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below me. He was asleep, phone buzzing softly beside him, Sophie's name flashing across the screen. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. Sometimes love doesn't sound like support, I wrote in my journal that night. It sounds like silence while your own dreams die quietly. And with that, I closed the notebook, shut down my computer, and turned off the light. Because tomorrow my life would begin again. 2 weeks before my flight, the air in our apartment felt heavier than ever, like even the walls knew something was ending. Charles still thought everything was normal. He'd hum in the shower, joke over breakfast, kiss my forehead before leaving for work. I matched his calmness, but mine wasn't love anymore. It was a mask. He didn't notice the small things, how I'd stopped buying groceries for two, how the framed pictures had quietly disappeared from the shelves, how my laptop was always open to files labeled relocation logistics. In his world, I was still the stable girlfriend, the woman who forgave the woman who stayed. But inside, I was already gone. It was strange the moment you stop fighting for something, you finally see it for what it really is. I saw how he'd talk about Sophie now, without hesitation, like I had earned the privilege of hearing about their friendship. I saw how he compared us without realizing. Sophie always pushed me out of my comfort zone, he'd say wistfully. You and I, we're just so steady. Steady, predictable, safe, all words that once felt like love, now sounding like pity. One night, I came home from work to find him on the couch scrolling through photos. Sophie's latest post, her laughing in the rain somewhere in Bali, captioned, "Chasing chaos again." He smiled to himself, that same half grin I hadn't seen in months. I stood there quietly until he noticed me. "Hey," I said softly, "do you ever think about how you look at her pictures?" He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I mean, you look at them like she still matters." He set his phone down, his tone shifting. "Oh God, Judith, not this again?" "This again," I repeated, my voice calm. "You mean me asking for basic respect?" He laughed under his breath. "You sound ridiculous. She's a friend. That's it." I held his gaze. Friends don't flirt through memories. He stood, running a hand through his hair. "You're so dramatic lately. Maybe you should talk to someone. This insecurity thing is getting worse." And that was the moment something inside me cracked, not loud or sudden, just a quiet break that didn't heal. I didn't argue. I just said, "You're right. I should talk to someone." That night, I texted my therapist friend Daniel, who'd been checking in since Charles's first job loss. He called immediately. "Judith, you sound exhausted," he said gently. "I am," I admitted, "but I think I'm also waking up." He stayed quiet, letting the silence do the work. "You know," I said after a while, I turned down Amsterdam for him. Twice. He didn't even say thank you the second time. "That's not love," Danielle said softly. "That's convenience." Those words stayed with me. Convenience. I was the soft landing he needed between his chaos and his ego. The next morning, I woke up before him. The sun had barely risen, painting the walls gold. I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and reread the relocation documents. The countdown was real, now flight in 13 days. Charles stumbled into the kitchen, yawning. "Morning," he said, leaning in for a kiss. I stepped back slightly, pretending to grab something from the counter. He didn't notice. He never did. "Hey," he said as he poured his coffee. "Sophie wants to grab lunch today. She's going through some stuff. You cool with that?" I didn't even look up. "Do whatever makes you happy." He blinked. "Really no lecture this time." "No lecture," I said simply. "You deserve to be around people who make you feel alive." He laughed, thinking I was being sarcastic. "You're weird today." Maybe I was, or maybe I was finally sane. That night he came home late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. He started telling me stories about their lunch, how Sophie was lost, but brave, how she reminded him of his old self. I nodded, as if listening to a stranger. When he finished, I asked quietly, "Charles, are you happy with me?" He hesitated. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're good for me, Judith. You're steady supportive. But sometimes, it feels like you don't get me anymore. Sophie and I, we just talk about things you don't care about." There it was. The truth, soft and cruel. I smiled faintly. "I see." He frowned. "See what?" "That you're already halfway gone." He looked confused, maybe even a little guilty, but not enough to say what mattered. Instead, he shrugged. "I think we both need space. You've been kind of intense lately. Maybe take a break, focus on yourself." I almost laughed. He thought this was his idea. "Fair point," I said again, my tone even. He looked at me warily. "You always say that. What does it mean?" "It means I said you're right about everything." He nodded, relieved, and went to bed early. I sat in the quiet for a long time after that. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and the soft sound of rain starting against the window. When I finally moved, it was to open my laptop one more time. There was the flight confirmation. Seat 14A, Amsterdam. Departure 2 weeks from today. I packed my first box that night. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm, Charles leaving earlier, coming home later, me smiling through the motions. When he mentioned having dinner with Sophie again, I said nothing. He mistook my silence for permission. The night before, she posted a picture of them together, laughing at some dimly lit bar. He came home smelling of whiskey and guilt. He didn't say a word, and neither did I. I lay awake beside him, counting the hours. In the morning, I'd start shipping my things, because I wasn't his home anymore, and I finally understood I didn't need to be. As I sealed another cardboard box with tape, a strange peace washed over me. It wasn't the peace of being done fighting. It was the peace of realizing the fight had never been fair. He still didn't know I was leaving, but soon he would. It wasn't anger that burned, I wrote in my journal that night. It was the cold clarity that follows the fire. And with that, I turned the page, folded it closed, and whispered to myself, this time, I'm choosing me. 2 weeks later, I was gone. The morning of my flight, Charles still didn't know. He thought I was attending a work conference out of state, a harmless lie that made my sudden absence easier to explain. I left a short note on the kitchen counter. Don't worry about me, I'll be fine. Take care of yourself. I didn't sign it. He didn't deserve my name as closure. By the time his alarm went off, I was already at the airport boarding a plane bound for Amsterdam. I watched the city disappear below the clouds and felt something I hadn't felt in years light. Freedom didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly with steady breaths and the soft hum of jet engines carrying me away from the version of myself that once begged to be chosen. Amsterdam felt like a dream I'd forgotten I'd once had. The air smelled of coffee and rain. The canals shimmered like threads of silver weaving between old buildings that leaned toward one another as if sharing secrets. My new apartment overlooked a park. Mornings began with sunlight spilling through wide windows, evenings with the sound of bicycles whirring past below. For the first time, I didn't plan around anyone. I just lived. Work was intense but fulfilling. My new team welcomed me like I'd always belonged. They asked questions, valued my ideas. I led meetings, built prototypes, stayed late because I wanted to, not because I was proving my worth to someone waiting at home. It felt foreign to be proud of myself again. On weekends, I'd take long walks along the canals, stop at markets for tulips, sit in small cafes with my notebook. Sometimes I'd write about the version of me who had stayed behind, and each time she seemed more like a stranger. A month passed before I heard from anyone back home. A friend texted me out of the blue. Judith, did you see Charles's new post? He's dating Sophie again. I stared at the screen for a moment, then smiled faintly. Of course he was. Predictable to the end. I didn't respond. I just turned my phone over, took a sip of my latte, and went back to reading. But life has a way of keeping you informed, whether you ask for it or not. A few weeks later, another message came from a mutual friend. So, you probably don't care, but Charles and Sophie quit their jobs. They're trying to be travel vloggers now. He's been borrowing money from people. It's getting weird. I laughed quietly, not cruelly, just in disbelief at how patterns repeat. It turned out that Sophie hadn't changed much since college. She still chased excitement like it was oxygen, still craved the rush of being admired, still believed in shortcuts disguised as passion. Charles, forever drawn to her chaos, followed willingly. Their posts started off romantic beaches, sunsets, big smiles. Then came the cracks, captions about rough patches and trust issues vague enough for sympathy, transparent enough for anyone who'd lived through it. Eventually, the updates stopped altogether. One evening, I got a message from Daniel, the therapist friend who'd been my quiet lifeline. Not to stir the past, he wrote, but Charles has been reaching out to people. Seems Sophie maxed out his credit cards and left him mid-trip. He's back home jobless. Guess karma finally booked a round trip. I stared at my phone, the faintest hint of sadness flickering through me. Not pity, just recognition. He had chosen the chaos he once complained about, and it had devoured him whole. I looked out my window, then rain streaking down the glass tram bells ringing faintly in the distance, and felt something close to gratitude. Not for his pain, but for my peace. A few months later, during a lunch break at work, I scrolled through an email from HR confirming my promotion. Lead developer, it read. I smiled, thinking how far I'd come since those nights of staying up late, begging for scraps of validation from someone who called me too controlling. I was building something now, not for him, not for anyone else, but for me. And the best part, I didn't have to prove that I was worthy of love just because I was stable. I'd finally learned that stability wasn't boring. It was freedom. Then one morning, as sunlight streamed through my window, I opened my inbox and froze. An email from an unfamiliar address. Subject from Charles. Body. Hey, I heard you're in Amsterdam. Congrats on everything. I know I don't deserve a reply, but I wanted to say, you were right about everything. Sophie was a mistake. I'm sorry. I read it twice, then deleted it without answering. No anger, no satisfaction, just closure, clean, silent, final. A few weeks later, I met some coworkers for drinks. We sat by the canal, laughter mingling with the sound of water against stone. At one point, someone asked, "So what made you move here, Judith?" I thought for a moment, then said, "A breakup. Best one I've ever had." They laughed, and so did I. When I walked home that night, I paused on a bridge and watched my reflection ripple across the water. The city lights shimmered like constellations below me. It hit me then, this was what peace looked like. Not the absence of pain, but the absence of needing someone else to fix it. I whispered softly to myself, almost like a vow, I won't apologize again for choosing myself. The next day, I deleted the last backup folder labeled Charles. Photos, messages, memories gone. And when the screen went blank, I didn't feel emptiness. I felt space. Weeks later, another message from a mutual friend popped up, uninvited but harmless. Sophie's gone. Charles is trying to rebuild. He tells people you abandoned him. Thought you'd want to know. I didn't. People like Charles always need a villain. I'd just finally stopped auditioning for the part. That night, I wrote one last journal entry before closing it for good. Karma doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't chase, it waits. And sometimes when it finally arrives, it doesn't look like revenge, it looks like freedom. I turned off the light, smiled in the dark, and let the sound of the rain carry me to sleep. Because this time, there was no waiting for anyone to come home. I was already there. It had been nearly 6 months since I'd left. Amsterdam had become my home in every way that mattered. My mornings started with soft music and coffee by the window. I rode my bike to work through tree-lined streets, nodding to the same bakery owner who waved every day. My life was calm, full, and quietly mine. Then, one afternoon, I opened my work inbox and saw a name I hadn't expected to ever see again. From unknown sender subject, please read Judith. My chest tightened before I even clicked. Hey, it's Charles. I got your work email from a mutual friend. Please don't be mad. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. You didn't deserve how I treated you. Sophie was not what I thought. She left me in debt, Judith. She lied, cheated, ruined my job. I miss what we had. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm begging you, just reply, even if it's to say you hate me. I stared at the screen for a long time. His words looked sincere, desperate even. But all I could think was how quiet the apartment felt, peaceful, undisturbed. I didn't reply. I closed the email and went back to work. That evening, a new message arrived. Then another. Then a third from a different address. Judith, please, I know you're reading these. You can't ignore me forever. I just need closure. Closure. The word that people use when what they really mean is control. I archived them all. A week later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I declined it. Then another. Then a voicemail, his voice shaking and tired. I know I messed up. I lost everything. Sophie's gone. My family's ashamed. I just need to talk. Please. I listened to it once, deleted it, and sat in silence for a while. There was a time when his pain would have pulled me back. But I wasn't that woman anymore. 2 days later, another familiar name popped up, Lisa, his sister. Wow, Judith. You really don't care, do you? He's falling apart. You're heartless. After everything he did for you, you can't even answer his messages. I almost laughed at the irony. Everything he did for me, I typed a single line, then deleted it. I wouldn't explain myself to people who'd never understood me in the first place. But Charles didn't stop. His emails became longer, guiltier, full of self-pity and half-truths. I thought you were better than this. You said you cared about people. I guess that was a lie, too. Sophie destroyed me, but you're the one who's really cruel. Every line reeked of the same old manipulation, repackaged as remorse. It didn't sting this time. It just confirmed what I already knew. People like him don't apologize because they've changed. They apologize because their safety net is gone. I stopped opening the messages. My spam folder became a graveyard of second chances I'd never grant. Months later, I flew home for the first time, a short visit for a mutual friend's wedding. The ceremony was small, held in a countryside vineyard, all golden light and string music. I felt like a ghost from another life stepping into a story that had already ended. I was talking with some old coworkers near the bar when I saw him. Charles. He looked thinner, older, like life had wrung him out. His suit didn't quite fit, and his eyes darted around until they found me. For a second, I saw recognition, then guilt, then hope. He walked over, clutching a glass, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Judith," he said quietly, "you look amazing." I smiled politely. "Hi, Charles." He swallowed. "I didn't think you'd come." "I wasn't planning to," I replied, "but it's a good venue." He laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, it is." Then his expression shifted, softening into something rehearsed. "I've wanted to talk to you for months. You never answered. I guess I can't blame you." I nodded slightly. "No, you can't." He sighed, eyes glistening. "I lost everything after you left. Sophie drained me dry emotionally, financially. She turned out to be a nightmare. I just kept thinking about how different you were, how good you were for me." His voice cracked, and for a fleeting moment, I almost pitied him. But pity isn't love. It's distance disguised as compassion. I said calmly, "I didn't leave you because of Sophie Charles. I left because of you." He blinked confused. "Because of me? Because you made me small," I said. "Because you convinced me that compromise was love. Because every time I had a dream, you called it selfish. And I believed you." He stared at me like he'd been slapped. "I was stupid, Judith. I know that now. Please, can't we start over? I've changed." "I swear I have." I smiled faintly, setting my drink down. "No, Charles. You've fallen apart. That's not the same thing as changing." His face twisted, pride flaring up in the ruins of his dignity. "You're so cold now. You used to care." "I still care," I said softly. "Just not about your redemption." The words landed between us like quiet thunder. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Around us, laughter and music filled the air. A new couple was dancing light, reflecting off her veil. The contrast was poetic a wedding as the backdrop to our final goodbye. Finally, he whispered, "You'll regret this someday." I met his eyes calm and unshaken. I already did once. Never again. Then I turned away. I didn't look back, not even when I heard him mutter something to his sister. Later that night, while walking to my car, I paused to breathe in the cool air. The sky was filled with stars, and for a second I thought of all the versions of myself I'd shed to get here. The girl who stayed, the woman who waited, the one who finally left. I whispered to the night, not for him, but for me. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with release. Back in Amsterdam a week later, I met someone new. He wasn't charming or loud. He didn't make grand promises. He just showed up consistently, quietly, honestly. When he asked about my past, I told him the truth. It taught me what peace looks like, and I'm not willing to lose it again. He smiled and said, "Then we'll keep it together." For the first time in years, I believed it. Sometimes I still get messages from mutual friends. "Charles is trying to get his life together. Lisa says he talks about you all the time." I just nod, wish them well, and move on. Because I don't need to prove anything, not to him, not to anyone. My story isn't about heartbreak anymore. It's about choosing myself every single day. And if Karma ever needed a witness, I'd tell her this. He once said I was predictable, but peace was the most unpredictable thing of all. He said I was too fragile to handle his past. Then he told me the number. 47. The word didn't just fall, it detonated. The air in our apartment shifted like the second before glass shatters. But that came later. That morning began with the smell of coffee and pancakes and the soft hum of a city that hadn't yet woken up. Sundays were our ritual. No alarms, no deadlines, just quiet. I always thought peace was proof of love. Turns out it can also be the silence before it dies. Robert was curled up on the couch legs, stretched eyes glued to his phone. He'd been scrolling for an hour, thumb flicking through whatever world existed inside that little glowing screen. I tried to ignore the tension radiating off him, the way his jaw tightened every time I spoke lately. I wanted to believe it was work stress, or maybe he was just tired. Anything but what it really was. "Breakfast ready," I said, setting the plates on the table. He didn't look up, just murmured something that sounded like thanks without moving his lips. I smiled anyway. I'd learned that relationships often survive on tiny acts of pretending. I poured syrup over his pancakes, placed the fork just so he liked it on the right, not the left. These small details had always felt like love to me. Familiarity, ritual care. He finally spoke. "Miranda's birthday's next weekend. She's doing it at the Vanguard." I froze mid-pour. The Vanguard. An overpriced club where people shouted over bad music and called it networking. "Do we have to?" I asked gently, trying to keep it light. "We've been saving for the new place, and you know that place charges for breathing." He looked up, his eyes flat. "It's her birthday. We can't just not go." I didn't say we shouldn't go. I just thought, there it is again. He cut me off, setting his phone down with a sharp click. That word, thought. What? You always have to overthink everything. You can't just live Betty. You need everything to make sense to be safe. His tone carried a blade under it. I blinked, taken aback. I'm not trying to control anything. I'm just saying maybe we should be practical. Practical. He spat the word like it tasted sour. You say it like a prayer, like if you're cautious enough, life will owe you peace. But it doesn't work that way. You play life on the easiest difficulty and call it wisdom. Something inside me recoiled. I set down my coffee slowly, my hands suddenly cold. Where is this coming from? He laughed a single dry sound. You wouldn't understand. You never do. I could have walked away, then ended the conversation, but some part of me, stubborn, hopeful, maybe desperate, wanted to bridge the gap. Robert, I'm not trying to fight. I just want to know what's wrong. He looked at me, then really looked, and the gaze was unfamiliar, hard, tired, mean. What's wrong, he said slowly, is that you're boring, Betty. Predictable. Safe. You make everything so small, so contained. I can't breathe in here sometimes. My throat tightened. I didn't know being stable was a crime. Stable. His lips twisted into a smirk. You think stability's attractive? You think men want someone who plans, who saves, who never takes a risk? He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper that stung worse than a shout. You're not woman enough to handle a man who's lived. The words hit me like cold water. What did you just say? He leaned back, crossing his arms. His confidence grew in proportion to my silence. You heard me. I tried to laugh, but it came out thin, trembling. And what exactly makes you so worldly, Robert? He smirked. Experience. Experience. His eyes glittered. 47. 47. What? He smiled wider, like he'd been waiting for me to ask. Women. Before you. My mind went blank. He said it like a victory, like a badge of honor. I've lived, he said. I've seen things, done things. I've been with women who had real passion. You're just this. His hand gestured toward the table, the pancakes, the apartment, the quiet life we'd built. The sound in the room changed. Even the clock seemed to hesitate. This, he repeated softer this time, as if explaining a simple fact. You're the calm after the storm, the stopgap, the one men settle for when they're done living. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the number that hurt, it was the tone, the pride, the way he wanted me to feel small. I'm sorry you see it that way, I said quietly. I thought we were building something real. He laughed again, a low, cruel sound. Real. This isn't real. This is retirement. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The sunlight fell across his face, harsh and unkind. Something inside me snapped, not with noise, but with silence. The kind of silence that ends things. I stood up, my body calm, almost mechanical. I looked around at the apartment, the framed photo from our trip to Bali, the books we'd picked together, the mug he'd bought me that said, "Good morning, sunshine." Every item suddenly looked like evidence from someone else's life. He was still talking something about me being sensitive, emotional, insecure, but his voice faded into the distance. Because in that moment, clarity arrived like cold light. He didn't want love, he wanted an audience. And I was done watching the show. The pancakes were still steaming when I turned and walked toward the bedroom. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even speak. But I think he heard something anyway, the sound of something breaking that can't ever be fixed. The silence after his words didn't fade, it deepened. It thickened until it became something you could almost touch, like fog made of grief. Robert's voice followed me down the hallway, laced with disbelief. Betty, where are you going? You're seriously walking away because of that. I didn't answer. My steps were steady, my pulse wasn't. Inside, everything was trembling, but on the outside, I was eerily calm. The bedroom looked different now. It wasn't ours anymore. It was a set, the scene of something that had already ended. I reached for the top shelf of the closet, pulling down my old forest green duffel bag. It landed on the bed with a dull thump. I hadn't used it since a trip with my sister 3 years ago. Funny how objects wait silently for the day they become symbols. I unzipped it. The sound cut through the quiet like a blade. Fold, jeans, fold, sweater, fold. My hands were moving on autopilot. Each piece of fabric I packed felt like a piece of myself reclaimed. Behind me, I could hear him pacing in the living room, still talking, not to comfort, but to control. You're overreacting. It was just a number, Betty. It's the past. Why can't you handle that? I didn't answer. The only sound from me was the whisper of folded fabric and the rustle of drawers. He tried again, louder this time. You always do this, get in your head and make everything dramatic. I tell you something honest and suddenly I'm the villain. Oh, yeah. Still nothing. When he realized the silence wasn't just anger, it was absence, his tone shifted. The arrogance cracked panic bleeding through. Betty, come on, don't be like this. We can talk, okay? You're not really leaving. I zipped one side of the duffel shut and went to the dresser. The perfume he'd bought me, because it smells expensive, stayed behind. I packed the one I'd worn before I met him. Lavender and rain, my scent, my past. I could feel him watching me from the doorway now. The air around him was nervous, restless. Betty, he said softly, you're seriously that insecure? That word again. I finally turned, meeting his eyes. My voice was quiet even. No, Robert. I'm not insecure. I'm just done. He blinked, like the concept was foreign to him. Done. What does that even mean? It means I've finally stopped mistaking your cruelty for honesty. I walked past him, my bag slung over my shoulder. He moved to block the door, arms spread wide like a parody of desperation. You're being ridiculous. I didn't mean it like that. Then why did you say it? I asked, calm as a surgeon. Because you make me feel. He stopped searching for words, for excuses, for something that could twist this back into my fault. Small, he finished finally. You make me feel small with your rules, your control, your quietness. The irony almost made me laugh. Then I guess we're even, I said. I reached for the door handle. He didn't move. His eyes flicked between my face and the bag, as if one of them might suddenly vanish. You're really doing this? Yes. You'll regret it. No, I said softly. I'll remember it. And that's worse for you. He flinched. I pushed past him, the edge of my shoulder, brushing his chest. It felt like crossing a border. In the living room, the half-eaten pancakes had gone cold. The coffee smelled bitter now. I paused for just a second, my eyes catching on the photo frame on the shelf. The two of us at the beach, sunburned, laughing. For a moment, my heart tried to reach back. Then I saw his reflection in the glass arms, crossed lips tight, and that moment died. I picked up my keys. Fine, he snapped. Go. Walk out. You always act like you're so above it all, but you're just scared. You can't handle a real man. I turned to him, my expression empty. Maybe I just don't need one. The hallway outside was cool and quiet. I could hear a neighbor's TV faintly through the walls, a commercial jingle about something meaningless. It was grounding, ordinary, human. The door closed behind me with a soft click. Not a slam, just finality. For a second, I stood there, hand still on the handle, waiting for the guilt to come. It didn't. Just a stillness, sharp and strange, like breathing in after crying too long. I walked down the corridor, my footsteps echoing softly. Each step away from that apartment felt like a page turning. By the time I reached the street, the morning light had shifted. The city was waking up. People laughed. Cars honked. Somewhere life continued indifferent and vast. I looked up at the sky and whispered to no one, "It's over." And for the first time in years, it really was. The first few days after I left were nothing but static. The kind of silence that hums inside your bones. I crashed at my friend Maya's apartment. The kind of friend who doesn't ask what happened, but leaves a blanket on the couch and a cup of tea beside you like she already knows. Her place smelled of peppermint and paint thinner, chaotic and alive. I hadn't realized how sterile my old apartment had been until now. The duffel bag sat in the corner, half open like a wound that hadn't scabbed yet. I didn't cry, not even once. People think tears mean heartbreak, but sometimes the hurt is too clean for that. Sometimes the pain cauterizes itself. Robert's words looped in my head for days. Not the insults, not even "you're not woman enough." It was the number. 47. He'd said it like a trophy count. I kept asking myself, what kind of person measures their worth that way? By the third night, I blocked his number, his socials, every trace of him that lived in pixels. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was surgery. Digital amputation. Maya noticed me scrolling through my contacts one evening, thumb hovering over his name. "Don't," she said, gently painting her nails without looking up. I wasn't going to. I lied. She smirked. "Good. He doesn't deserve your attention, even in pretend." She was right. But still, in the quiet hours of the night, the echo of his voice found me. "You'll regret it." Maybe part of me feared he'd be right. Maybe that's what healing is, the long process of proving someone wrong who doesn't even deserve the proof. The first text came 3 days later. Unknown number. But I knew. Unknown Betty. "I'm sorry. I was angry and said something stupid. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. My heart didn't race. It just ticked like a clock reminding me what time it was. He wasn't apologizing. He was rewriting, turning the knife into a misunderstanding, trying to paint my boundary as hysteria. I deleted it, blocked the number. 2 days later, another number, another message. Unknown. Okay, fine. I get it. You're hurt. But walking out like that, that's pathetic, Betty. You always make everything a drama. Pathetic. That word again, the one he used to make me shrink. Except now it just hung in the air meaningless. I could almost see the panic behind it. I didn't delete that one immediately. I saved it. Like evidence. A reminder of who I was walking away from. A week passed. I started going to the gym again. My body had forgotten what strength felt like. Each press, each stretch, felt like reclaiming a piece of ground that had been occupied for too long. Work helped too. I threw myself into deadlines reports late nights. I could focus there. Numbers and projects didn't lie to you. Then came another text. Unknown. I can't stop thinking about you. It was just a number. Those girls meant nothing. You're the only one who mattered. Please, I love you. I laughed out loud, not cruelly, just wearily. The pattern was too familiar. Insult, guilt, affection, desperation. The cycle of emotional gravity pulling me back in. I didn't reply. Silence was my message. That night, I went to the balcony of Maya's apartment. The city stretched below, windows glowing like small universes, each one holding a life, a story, someone else's chaos. Mine felt suddenly small, manageable. I realized something. Robert wasn't a villain. He was an emptiness, wearing a confident smile. And I had mistaken that emptiness for depth, because it echoed my own insecurities. Maya joined me, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. You look peaceful, she said. I think I am, I replied. It's strange. Peace always feels strange when you've been surviving chaos. We stood there for a long moment, the wind carrying the distant sound of a siren, the city humming beneath us. When I went back inside, I took out my phone one last time, not to check for messages, but to erase him completely. No more old photos, no chat history, not even his name in my contact list. It took 3 seconds, then my screen went blank. The weight that left my chest was immediate. Maya looked up from her book. Finally deleted him. I nodded. Every molecule. She smiled. Good. Make room for someone better. Maybe just room for myself, I said quietly. That night I slept. Really slept. The first dreamless sleep in months. And when morning came, I woke not to the sound of his voice or my phone vibrating, but to the sound of rain against the window. The city smelled clean. My mind did too. A month later, I saw him again. It wasn't planned. I was sitting in a cafe near my new office, sipping cappuccino and highlighting sections of a client proposal when the air changed a faint electric pull that made my stomach twist. I looked up. Robert. He was standing by the door, scanning the room. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, his posture slightly caved. His once sharp confidence had softened into something brittle. For a second, I thought about pretending not to see him, but he spotted me before I could decide. Our eyes met. His expression flickered surprise, then relief, then something like fear. He walked over. Betty, he said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. Wow, you look good. The words felt rehearsed, like a man trying to remember how charm works. I nodded, polite but distant. Robert. He hesitated. Can I sit? I'd rather you didn't. He sat anyway. The audacity was almost nostalgic. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He stared at his hands, fidgeting with his phone. I studied the steam rising from my coffee. It felt like watching a ghost, familiar but hollow. Finally, he exhaled. I've been awful. I said nothing. He ran a hand through his hair, which was overgrown and dull now. I don't even know what I was trying to prove that day. I was showing off, I guess. Trying to sound impressive. I met his eyes. 47 is not impressive, Robert. It's just sad math. He flinched. You always did know how to cut through me. I didn't smile. No, I just learned to stop pretending. He leaned forward, his voice soft. Betty, I was stupid. I thought if I acted like I didn't care, it made me stronger. But it didn't. It made me cruel. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I see that now. Tears gathered in his eyes. For a second, just a second, my old instinct kicked in. The urge to comfort, to fix, to absorb someone else's pain like it was mine to carry. But then I remembered how that instinct had been used against me. I stayed silent. He reached for my hand across the table. I pulled mine back before he touched me. His face crumpled. So that's it, he whispered. After everything? Yes, I said simply. He blinked hard. You can't just erase 2 years. I'm not erasing them, I said. I'm learning from them. His eyes darkened. The shift was quick pity turning to resentment. You're cold, you know that. You act like you're some enlightened saint, but you're just scared to feel anything real. I tilted my head. That's interesting. You confuse boundaries with coldness. That's why we never worked. He stared at me like he didn't understand the language I was speaking. The silence stretched. The cafe was filled with the clatter of cups and low murmurs of strangers, ordinary life going on around us. He finally laughed a hollow, bitter sound. You'll end up alone, Betty. You think walking away makes you strong, but it just makes you lonely. I stood gathering my notebook and coffee. Lonely is better than small. He froze eyes wide. I placed a few bills on the table for my drink. Take care of yourself, Robert. When I turned to leave, he called after me, his voice low and cracking. You're not even angry. I looked over my shoulder. No, that's what scares you, isn't it? The cafe door closed behind me. The city greeted me with a rush of sound cars' voices whined all alive, all moving forward. My reflection appeared faintly in the glass door as I walked away calm, grounded someone I barely recognized, but finally respected. Inside, Robert was just a blur of motion, a man left talking to his own echoes. For a long time, I used to believe closure came from apologies. But as I walked down that street, the truth was crystal clear. Closure comes from indifference. And mine was absolute. The weeks after that cafe encounter unfolded like sunlight through a window after a long storm. Not all at once, just enough to remind me that warmth still existed. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. I filled it with soft, light, secondhand furniture and the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty anymore. Every corner reflected freedom, not the loud, rebellious kind, but the quiet certainty that comes from having no one left to explain yourself to. The first few nights I slept with the window open. The city hum beneath me became a lullaby. For months I had been braced for impact. Now I could finally exhale. Work began to bloom again, too. Projects that had once felt tedious now felt like proof of competence, of control. I wasn't healing, I was rebuilding. And then somewhere between grocery runs and late-night editing, I met Nathan. He wasn't dazzling. Not the kind of man who fills a room, more the kind who listens when you speak. A soft-spoken designer who found beauty in small things, color gradients, old records, stray cats that linger near his studio. Our first conversation was about a spilled latte and a shared laugh over how fragile good moods can be before caffeine. There was no spark of obsession, no thunderclap, just ease. We started seeing each other, slowly lunches, walks, movies. He never asked about Robert, and I never offered. There was a safety in that silence. A mutual understanding that peace doesn't need an origin story. One evening, about 2 months after I'd left Robert, I got a small reminder of the past I thought I'd buried. An envelope, forwarded from my old address. Inside, a few stray bills, a postcard from a friend, and one thin slip of paper, a flyer for a club event. The Vanguard. The name alone made me laugh, but not bitterly this time, just with mild disbelief at how much power one word used to have over me. Still, it was a loose end, and I didn't like loose ends, so I decided to close it cleanly. I unblocked Robert's number for the first time in months and sent a short neutral message. Me hi. Please forward any remaining mail to the address below. This will be my final message. I added the details and hit send. Then I reblocked him. Administrative, clinical, over. Or so I thought. Less than a minute later, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I didn't need to check. My gut knew. I answered. At first, nothing. Just breathing uneven shallow. Then a broken whisper. You win. It was Robert. His voice was stripped of its usual armor, no arrogance, no edge. Just exhaustion. Robert, I said quietly. Okay, he continued, voice cracking. You win, Betty. I'm nothing without you. I can't sleep. I can't think. I've tried to move on, but the girls, they don't get it. They think I'm dramatic. My family just looks at me like I'm a failure. I said nothing. The silence on my end stretched long enough that he began to fill it. I ruined it, didn't I? He muttered. All of it. The women before you, they didn't mean anything. They were just noise. You were the only one who ever made me feel real. My throat tightened, not with sympathy, but with clarity. Then why did you destroy it? I asked softly. I don't know, he said. Because I'm broken. Because I thought power meant control. You used pain as proof of strength, I replied. You confused dominance with depth. He started crying, then the kind of sob that comes from realizing you've run out of performances. Tell me what to do, he begged. I'll go to therapy, I'll change. Just don't hang up. Don't leave me in this silence. I took a slow breath, my voice calm even. Robert, this isn't about winning or losing. It never was. Then what is it about? It's about cause and effect, about what happens when someone mistakes cruelty for confidence. I didn't mean it like that. It doesn't matter what you meant, I interrupted gently. It matters what you did. He went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a confession. You called me insecure, I continued, but I walked away because I finally respected myself. You called me cold, but I was just done freezing for someone else's warmth. I could hear him breathing, shallow and unsteady. You don't mean that, he said, his voice breaking. You still care. I used to, I admitted, but caring stopped being love when it started feeling like survival. Another pause, then a whisper. You don't forgive me. I don't need to, I said. Forgiveness is for people still holding on. I'm not. The silence that followed was long, heavy. Then quietly I added, take care of yourself, Robert. And I hung up. I didn't block the number this time. I didn't need to. Some connections die on their own once they run out of power. I set the phone down on the windowsill. Outside, the city was bathed in amber light. Down below, I saw Nathan walking toward the building, a paper bag of takeout in his hand, a small smile on his face when he spotted me through the glass. I smiled back. And for the first time, I didn't feel haunted. The ghosts were still there, faint outlines of what used to hurt, but they no longer reached for me. Because ghosts only linger in places where they're fed, and I was finally starving them.